following podcast is part of the Underdog Sports Podcasting Network. For a full list of our shows, as well as breaking sports news and engaging feature stories, visit us at www.theunderdogsports.com.
Talking around the bases with Ryan Carter and Logan Smith.
Welcome to Talking Around the Bases, Episode 8. I'm Ryan Carter, and I got with me again Logan Smith. On this week's episode, we're going to be breaking down a lot more transactions that have now transpired and a lot of free agents who have been picked up during the spring training and how they're getting acclimated. And this week will be the first week of our split of going over who we project to win certain awards, such as Silver Slugger, Gold Glove. So we'll get into that and some other breaking news. How are you doing again this week, Logan?
Man, I'm doing great. More spring training games. Obviously, can't complain about that. Every day is just a day closer to opening day, and finally, we're getting some nice weather where I'm at. So, and like you said, there was some great transactions this week. Gives us a lot of things to talk about, and it's just always great to be back with you talking about baseball.
Yeah, and, a lot of teams out there starting to make more and more roster cuts, so it's starting to take shape. Of course, there's some teams out there that haven't really cut people, like Ronald Acuna for the Braves has just been absolutely crushing the ball this spring. I know they were probably thinking that he's going to go start in AAA, which he may as well still do, but it's hard to do that when you got a guy who's just absolutely crushing the ball and turning heads against some of the good pitchers. I mean, he has like 4 home runs, and yesterday he hit an absolute moonshot that was just I've never seen a ball crush so hard in my life.
Yeah, man. I think he's going to get the Chris Bryant treatment from a few years back, where they basically start him off maybe for 2 weeks down in the minors just to gain that extra year of arbitration. But I know that spring training's dead, so we got to take it with a grain of salt. But I mean, he leads all of spring training with hits so far. He's batting .432, like you said, 4 home runs, including a bomb yesterday. Had a great home run off of Tanaka off the Yankees earlier in the spring. Has 4 walks, 4 stolen bases. I think this guy, there was a lot of hype surrounding him in the offseason going into spring training, where some people were probably questioning on how, maybe if he was worth all the hype or not. But so far with what he's done in the spring, he looks like he could live up to it.
Yeah, and, one of the more notable things is his batting average is .432, so he's getting a lot of at-bats. It's not like a small sample size, and he's just absolutely crushing the ball. On the other side is a guy who crushed the ball was Michael Andujar, who we talked about last week for the Yankees. And, today he actually got cut from camp and sent to the minor league training, which we knew was going to happen because he's not going to break camp with them. But, it's two different sides where the Yankees really don't have a spot right away, whereas neither do the Braves. But with that type of talent, it's hard to suppress it for long.
Like we'll talk about with with Neil Walker getting signed there on that 1-year contract. It kind of breaks. It gives them some more insurance with him at second, and now they'll probably move Drury to third to fill in for Andujar, like you said, because he got sent down. So that kind of just gives them more time in the minors, gives them definitely some time to let them get that extra year of arbitration, and it just gives them a solid guy to have maybe on the bench, or if he works out well for him, Neil Walker that is, then they could start him all year.
Yeah, that's one of the big things is with the Neil Walker pickup, that 1 year, $4 million, is that now with him and Drury, you have a lot of the infield covered around. It's blocking some of the prospects, but that's fine. Gives them enough time to work things out. Have that clock start a little bit later, as we were talking about with Acuna as well. So it's one of those things that you're going to have to keep an eye on. And on the flip side of the things is now we got more free agents going. I mean, you still have Greg Holland out there and Alex Cobb, but two of the big pitchers that we've been talking about each week are finally off the board, with Jake Arrieta going to the Phillies for 3 years, $75 million. And like we talked about, there was an opt-in that he could make it 5 years, $120 million. And on the other end, there was Lance Lynn going to the Twins for 1 year, $12 million, which is a bargain deal for the Twins.
Yeah, I like both of these signings for their teams. The Twins, even though they picked up Jake Odorizzi in the trade, I think with Irving Santana being out the first 4 to 6 weeks of the season, they saw a bargain with Lance Lynn for only 1 year, 12 million, and they decided to grab him. I can't blame them. That's a good pickup. It makes them even stronger contenders for an AL wildcard spot. And the Jake Arrieta trade, obviously he wanted, I think he said Jordan Zimmerman money, which would have been a lot more than what he got. But the Phillies, that's a good. I think that's a good deal for both sides. It's a good deal for Arrieta, who's going to have a nice 3 years. If he performs really well and could opt in, he gets a big contract out of it, 5 years. And for the Phillies, it makes them even more interesting. The NL East behind the Nationals is obviously kind of a toss up for anybody. And with the Phillies making moves to get Carlos Santana, they still have obviously young sensation Rhys Hoskins. They're going to be a really exciting team this year, and he's going to be a great combo to pair with Aaron Nola at the top of that rotation.
Yeah, and as we'll get into next week's going to be our projection show where we're going to say who we think's going to win each division wild card, how they're going to match up in the playoffs, who we think's going to win the World Series MVP, that sort of thing. More of a postseason projection than this week. And one of the things I'm definitely going to talk about next week, but wanted to highlight a little bit this week is I think Lance Lynn, like I was telling you yesterday, I think now that kind of gives the Twins a good spot to make a run for the division. I don't think that they're as good as the Indians now. Indians' rotation is still far better, but I mean, with Jose Barrios or Odorizzi, Lance Lynn, I mean, as soon as they get Irvin Santana back, I mean, that's a lot of really good, solid pitchers. Now, of course, Lance Lynn coming over from the NL, definitely going to be a little bit of an adjustment period. Although in spring training, his first start was amazing. He was pitching like he has been all spring, so. It's one of those things I like that the Twins picked him up. I wish that the Orioles would have done it because that's one year, $12 million. I'm sure the Orioles could have easily paid that, so I'm not sure why they didn't because they are desperate need of another starter. And on the Jake Arrieta side, I think this is perfect for the Phillies. They have money to spend, and with Jake Arrieta there, now it kind of opens up with the free agent market coming out next year that. It gives them more enticing as a player to go there. Like now they have Arrieta and they have a lot of young guys. So if I'm a free agent, I'm looking at them to go to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it just makes them, like I said, more interesting. And I think the last big free agent signing from the past week was the A's actually went out and signed Jonathan Lucroy to a 1-year contract. Obviously, they had young catcher Bruce Maxwell, but in the offseason, he got into some trouble. So they're not sure if he's going to be suspended or not. They have a lot of young starting pitchers. So Jonathan Lucroy is kind of that veteran catcher who could have a bounce back season, not really that big of a risk to take. And he's really going to help out those young starting pitchers, I think. So I think that was a really nice pickup for Oakland.
Yeah, 1 year, $6.5 million. Definitely a nice pickup as like a buffer of, just a placeholder really. And a guy like you're saying, veteran, he can, show those young pitchers a little bit of the ropes, be a nice veteran presence there for a young team. So I definitely like that deal. And on the flip side of things, we also have two players who actually got extensions. You got Jose Altuve, who got a 5-year, $150 million extension that doesn't start until 2020 because he's still in the 4-year deal that he already signed. So the 5-year, $150 million will start in 2020, which puts him as an Astro through until his 34-year age season. And the second one was Suarez getting a 7-year, $66 million with the Cincinnati Reds. So, both those players locked in long terms for the respective teams.
Yeah, I mean, the Altuve deal, since he's older than Machado and Harper, so obviously the length wasn't going to be as long. But I think that's going to be a really interesting number with the $30 million a year to compare to what Harper and Machado get next year. I mean, they could be around that. They might go a little bit over. They could go a little bit under. But I mean, Jose Altuve, deservingly World Series champion, won the MVP last year. He's been an Astro his whole life, and hopefully he gets to retire there eventually, maybe get another contract towards the end of there. Because when I think of the Astros, you automatically pretty much think of Jose Altuve since he was one of the first guys during the rebuild to come up, and obviously they built around him. And, the Reds like who they have in Suarez, got him from the Tigers a few years back. Their top prospect, Nick Senzel, who was supposed to be a third baseman, they've actually been playing him at shortstop. So obviously they really like Suarez, since they probably want to keep him at the hot corner and then move Senzel to short. Congratulations to both those guys getting paid, well deserved. And like I said, it's going to be interesting to compare Jose Altuve's $30 million a year to what Harper and Machado get next year.
Yeah, and it's an age difference, of course, and if you think about it, he's signing an extension right now to where in 2 years is whenever his current one would be up, which would be 29, and whereas right now Harper and Machado are 25, so going in they'll be roughly 26 years of age whenever they get their deal. So it's not a big difference, couple years, 3 years, but I mean it's enough in play time. So it's going to be hard to see, because Jose Altuve having those big years and signing the extension now rather than waiting out and being like, if he has another MVP year, could he have gotten more? But 5 years, $150 million, definitely good. We'll have to keep an eye and see how that affects for the Machado, Harper of next year, even Kershaw, because that's one person we never talk about, just because we just assume the Dodgers are going to re-sign him, and that may not be the case. And Kershaw is a free agent next year too.
Yeah, exactly. That's going to be really interesting to see. And I guess once again, two things that are on the other side of the spectrum are two guys that are now in the shame column, I guess, with Jorge Polanco. That was actually just right before we started recording came out. He got suspended for 80 games for testing positive to a PED. And the Royals right fielder, Jorge Bonifacio, he also got suspended 80 games for PED. So how do you think those are going to affect those two teams in the AL Central?
I think it really hurts the Twins. I feel like Polanco was going to be a really good addition for them with the second half that he had last year, but then you don't know is that second half because of the PEDs, because he really tore it up in the second half, had like 11 home runs in 55 games, had like a 351 average. So he was really tearing up the ball, and I feel like now that it hurts the Twins more so, just because they're going to have to go with what's his name, Orlando.
Well, they could. What I'm looking at on Roster Resource has actually them slating Eduardo Escobar, who was supposed to be who was going to be maybe their third baseman, since Sano might be suspended to start the year as shortstop, and they put Sano at third base. Now the problem is going to be if Sano is suspended for his off-season altercations, then they're really going to have a problem. They might have to slot in Eric Ibar, who they invited on a non-roster invite to spring training, or one of their top prospects in Nick Gordon, or even Royce Lewis. So, like you said, the Twins, who you think are going to be obviously competitive even for the division, and I think they could definitely battle it out for a wild card spot. At least it's for the first half of the year, but they might have to figure something out if that's a position of weakness. And for the Royals right field job, obviously neither one of us think the Royals are going to really be contenders this year. That was one of their young guys who I actually thought could be exciting to watch, so I guess cross him off the books. And I think this pretty much makes for sure that Jorge Soler, ex-Cub, is going to really get a chance to shine for the Royals. So maybe there's something in the water in the AL Central, but hopefully they can get that stuff figured out, because we never like to see guys get suspended.
Yeah, that's for sure. And the funny thing is we had our fantasy draft yesterday, and you guys were joking because there's one player that you guys have that always picks someone in the second round, and he always gets suspended. Second round, right? And this year he took Chris Bryant, and we're like, oh, he's going to get suspended for PEDs. But, I mean, someone did get suspended, but it was, Jorge Polanco, which was today, which is, I did not see that one coming. Definitely like I said, it's going to hurt the Twins a lot. I still think it's not going to hurt them as much in the realm of like winning, because they obviously have other good talent there. Max Kepler, they have Brian Dozier, they have Joe Mauer still. So I think that the Twins will still be fine in an offensive standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's going to be fun to see. As I talked about, baseball, it's getting closer. You said we had our fantasy draft yesterday, so that was a lot of fun. Thanks for coming out for that. And I think that's pretty much it for the weekly transaction. So just before we start talking about all of our predicted awards, we just wanted to say we're gonna go over it at the end of the year. For each one we get right, we get a point, and obviously whichever one of us has more points at the end is the winner. So this will definitely be something that'll be fun to keep track of as the year goes on and towards the end of the year, to see who comes out on top.
Yeah, and Just like we did last week with our top 5, I felt like we were going to have a lot of matchups, and we really didn't have a lot. I mean, as I was looking over it again, I mean, we do have some that matched up, but we have a lot of differences on players who we think are actually going to take home these awards and have a good year. And also, before we start, just like to say thank you for everyone who did tune in and listen last week. I think we reached like 1,600 downloads. So, thank you everyone who rated, who's still listening week in and week out. We haven't received anything into our email or in the comments, just letting us know about anything you want us to talk about or your top 5 players or anything. But definitely after this, if you want to send us something to talkingaroundthebases@gmail.com, send it to us. We can do the same thing with this. If you want the Google spreadsheet, we can also send it out to you as well, as we'll be posting in the comments of our YouTube page that we have up and running, which you can just find, which is just Talking Around the Bases as well. So thank you again for everyone who's listening and supporting, and this one is definitely going to be a good prediction show.
Yeah. This one and next week are going to be a ton of fun. Like Ryan said, I'll even tweet it out on the Talking Around the Bases Twitter account. If you want to find my personal Twitter account, it's at Hatman15 that's just Hatman15 with 2 N's. So you could tweet mine if you want to talk about, what your predictions are for the awards, or the YouTube account, the emails, anything. We just like to hear from you guys, but we know you're out there listening. And like Ryan said, we're just so appreciative, and it's just been so much fun to start this off season. I feel like it's only going to get better as the season goes on.
Yeah, like anytime, like we talk about baseball, not just on the podcast, but after the podcast and with each other during the week as well. So we always are going to talk about baseball. So if you want to send us something to talk to us, just do it anytime. We're more than happy to talk about it. So without further ado, I guess what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and start with the AL Gold Glove. And I guess the way that we're going to do this is we'll just go through each position and say who we have. And then if anyone kind of stands out in our mind, we can kind of go over them as well. So for the AL Gold Glove, I have catcher Salvador Perez. I have first base Chris Davis. I have second base Jose Altuve. Third base Josh Donaldson. Shortstop, I have Manny Machado. Left field, I have Alex Gordon. Center field, Kevin Kiermaier. Right field, Mookie Betts. And then pitching, Dallas Keuchel.
For catcher, I took Martin Maldonado on the Angels. First base, Greg Bird. Second base, Ian Kinsler. Third base, Jose Ramirez. The shortstop, I took the great Andrelton Simmons. Left field, Andrew Benintendi. Center field, Byron Buxton. Right field, Carlos Gomez. And the pitcher, I took Chris Archer.
Yeah, and right away, one of the things that stuck out is I wanted to put Andrelton Simmons in there at shortstop, and then I got to thinking, I was like, well, Manny Machado's moving over to short, which is his original position, and he's just been really good at third base, and I accidentally put him in third base first, and I was like, oh, wait, no, he's not going to be there this year. I like Andrelton Simmons. I think he's amazing with the glove, just absolute wizard. I feel like Manny Machado is going to steal it from him this year because he's in the contract year, of course, being a free agent, and it's a position that he's more comfortable in. And if he's that good at that good at third base, moving him over a little bit short and the arm he has, I feel like he's just going to take it away.
Yeah, I mean, with shortstop, you took Machado, I took Simmons. I think both of those guys are great. Nobody's going to argue that. And the same thing with center field. You took Kiermaier, I took Buxton. Nobody can argue either of those guys. We actually didn't have a single matchup. We didn't pick the same guy for our entire AL Gold Glove. So that's really interesting. A lot of it's just us guessing who we think is going to win. There's not really a right formula to go with this since most of the time it is a popularity contest. But, those two were really interesting. Simmons is awesome with the Angels. Machado is awesome with the O's. That's going to be a really fun to watch because they bring so much offensively, especially Machado. But, those are guys that you tune in to see defensively as well. So, it wouldn't surprise me if Machado wins, Kiermaier wins, whoever you want to pick with this one. Those are really just some of the best in the league that are playing defense.
Yeah, and one of those things is, you have Martin Maldonado, who obviously won it last year. He's really good with the defense. And he's one of those guys that I wanted to go with this year, but I had to end up going with Salvador Perez just because I feel like his defense has been, climbing up, whereas the rest of my guys kind of do match up with last year, their counterpart, being as, Byron Buxton. He did win last year. I feel like I kind of like Kiermaier a little bit better, but like you said, you can't really fault any of these guys since a lot of times it is a popularity contest, but more so these guys really do deserve it.
No, yeah, exactly right. I mean, at the end of the day, you have Alex Gordon in left field. Obviously, he doesn't bring very much defensively, but you can always expect that guy to play great defense in left. Mookie Betts is awesome in right field. He could probably be a center fielder, but they have Jackie Bradley Jr. You put Jose Altuve. I put Ian Kinsler. It's just going to be fun to see how this breaks down. We could be wrong on every single pick. One of us might get half of them right. It's just something that's fun. Obviously, with the Gold Glove for the pitcher, who knows on that one? But it's just all in fun.
Yeah, and back to the Alex Gordon thing. You meant to say like offense. He doesn't bring much offense, but his defense.
Oh yeah, yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, no, you're fine.
No offense. Yeah.
Yeah, because I mean he does bring the defense, of course. And with the pitcher, Dallas Keuchel, I just picked him because he didn't win it last year, but before then he won it like 4 years straight. So, but it is hard to attest who's just going to be the best fielder. That's why these are a lot exciting because there's some guys in here that you may not think, and they could definitely do it. But moving on to the NL side of things, at catcher I have Buster Posey. First base I have Brandon Belt for the Giants, so I got the tandem up there. Second base I have Javier Baez. Third, Nolan Arenado. Shortstop Addison Russell. Left field Marcell Ozuna. Center field Billy Hamilton. Right field I have Jason Hayward, and pitching I have Zach Greinke.
We do have a couple of similarities on this one. At catcher I took Wilson Contreras. First base Joey Votto. Second base Javier Baez. Third base Nolan Arenado. Shortstop Brandon Crawford. Left field Christian Yelich. Center field Lorenzo Cain. Right field Gregory Polanco. And at pitcher I took Jacob deGrom.
Yeah, we do have some similarities. That's pretty much at the hot corner and at second base, where we match up with Javier Baez and Nolan Arenado each. Other than that, everyone else is different. Our outfields are total polar opposite. I pretty much think every single outfielder I took won last year, except for center field. It was Ender Encarts. I can't even say it.
Enciarte.
There we go. Can't even say it. Instead of him, I have Billy Hamilton. So that's one difference that we have there. But other than that, I think I took staples. Buster Posey obviously winning it. So I kind of like your list, though, because I think Wilson Contreras definitely might take it away this year. Joey Votto, known for his bat, of course, has always been a good defensive first baseman and hasn't really won it because Paul Goldschmidt has been winning it like left and right because his glove is just amazing, and that's one guy that we both don't have. We don't even have Paul Goldschmidt.
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, at least we agreed because Nolan Arenado is a stud. I mean, that guy, crazy offensively, crazy defensively. That guy's just a beast. I took Christian Yelich because I think he's a natural center fielder. But since they brought over Lorenzo Cain, who I also have winning the Gold Glove, I think they're just going to have a really good defensive outfield this year. Brandon Crawford, he seems to be Mr. Consistency at shortstop. And Jason Hayward in right for you. That's a great pick. Obviously, Billy Hamilton can run down any baseball, so he's obviously a candidate. And, this is obviously really interesting as well. Buster Posey versus Wilson Contreras is a really fun matchup for defense on catcher because you kind of have the veteran with Posey versus the young guy in Contreras. So, once again, it's just going to be fun to see who has the most points, especially in these categories at the end of the year.
Yeah, and last year Tucker Barnhart went in the catcher position as well, had an amazing breakout year. So that's kind of how on the flip side I think Wilson Contreras is going to break out this year and have kind of the same-ish thing. I think Buster Posey is just going to get back to the defensive side of the ball and just take it home, but it's definitely going to be interesting. I figured that we would have a lot of matchups in the NL just because at third base, I'm not going to put anyone in there other than Arenado. I mean, obviously he could have a terrible year, but he's just, I don't know, he's just like a vacuum over there.
Yeah, we'll keep picking him until he does have that bad year at least.
Yeah, and then from the AL and NL, they do the platinum gloves each year, which is the best fielder, and for the AL, I actually went with Manny Machado, who won it a couple years ago. I think it was like 3 years now ago that he won it. So I feel like he's just going to have an amazing year overall. And on the NL side, I took Nolan Arenado.
For the AL, I took Byron Buxton, the Twins center fielder, and then for the NL, once again, what else can we say? Nolan Arenado would win the Platinum Glove for me on the NL side.
Yeah, so you're going with repeats in both of those, with Buxton winning the Platinum Glove last year and Arenado winning the Platinum Glove. But yeah, for the Arenado side, just give it to him every year until he retires. I just don't think I'd put anyone else in there until he kind of tails off, maybe at the end of his years, or if someone shows they could just be better defensively. But going with Byron Buxton again, I definitely like it, but there is always those sophomore slumps, and I feel like he's going to be focusing more on offense this year.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be a fun year. All those teams should be contenders. The Orioles will be fun to see because Machado is going into the contract year. So let's see if we have any of the same, Gold Glove winners. Let's bring it over to the hitting side of things. Who do you have for your AL Silver Slugger?
Yeah, so speaking of offense, the AL Silver Slugger, I have catcher Gary Sanchez. First baseman, I have Joey Gallo, who I think is primed to have a breakout year. Second base, Jonathan Scope. Third base, Manny Machado. Shortstop, Carlos Correa. Outfield, I have Mike Trout, Giancarlo Stanton, and Aaron Judge. And for DH, the only DH in the league is Nelson Cruz.
Yeah, that was not a surprising pick, even though some of them are. I think the Nelson Cruz DH thing fits you well. At catcher, I also have Gary Sanchez. First base, Jose Abreu. Second base, Jose Altuve. Third base, I went Josh Donaldson. Shortstop, this is my surprising pick. I took Francisco Lindor. Outfield, I have Mike Trout, Giancarlo Stanton, JD Martinez, and then at DH, I took Edwin Encarnacion.
Yeah, and it's gonna be interesting. I took Judge, of course, and you took Martinez. Martinez coming over from his time with the Diamondbacks in the NL. Now he's full time in the AL again. So obviously that award is up for grabs for him. So that's a big difference that we have there. Another big difference is you have the Jose's up at the front, Abreu and Altuve, where I have Joey Gallo and Scope. Definitely, I can make a case for either or of Abreu and Gallo. Last year, Gallo had an amazing year, and I think this year it's going to get even better. Scope had a really good last year, whereas this year he could tail off and dip down, but I feel like maybe he's just getting going and he's not going to drop off, although a lot of people do think so. I feel like all these guys are definitely great hitters, and any one of these guys could take it home.
Yeah, I mean, I think for some of this stuff, we're just splitting hairs, between Machado and Donaldson or Correa and Lindor. But the really exciting one is going to be Gallo and Abreu. I'm taking the Mr. Consistent Jose Abreu, who seems to put up about 30 and 100 every year. And you're taking Joey Gallo, who probably has the potential to hit 55 homers like Judge did last year, but he probably also has the potential to hit about 220 in the batting average category. So, that I really like that pick with Gallo. I think that's a really risk-reward pick. And the rest of it kind of seems like it's pretty simple. So I like this one as well. I really like your picks, and obviously Gary Sanchez, bearing an injury, is probably going to win the Silver Slugger for catcher.
Yeah, and the main thing is a couple guys that are omitted from this list is last year's winners, of course. Jose Ramirez at third base and George Springer in the outfield, who had amazing years, and guys that can definitely repeat this year, and we don't have them on our list. So, like I said, a lot of this is just picking who we think might have a good year, a lot more so for fun and to look back, because projections are just always fun at the end of the year and be like, hey, we were really right or we were really wrong. Like Gallo could hit like 10 home runs this year and have like a 150 average and then just be sent to the bench for some reason, and that's that.
Well, if we mess up too bad, we'll just have to edit it out and make sure nobody.
Yeah, we'll just pull it and then be like, hey, go back and listen to episode 7 because it was just wrong. Exactly. Episode 8, that one was wrong too. So all of our predictions, top 5, they're all wrong.
We'll be the first podcast ever to get 100% on all of our guesses, no matter what happens.
Oh yeah. Well, I'll get 100% and you will. So they're just going to do 2 winners this year.
All right, let's see who you got for the NL, Ryan.
Yeah, NL, we got catcher Buster Posey. If you can't tell, I like him a lot. First base, Cody Bellinger. Second base, Daniel Murphy. Third base, some dude named Nolan Arenado. Shortstop, Corey Seager. And then in the outfield, I have Charlie Blackmon, Rice Hoskins, Bryce Harper. And at pitcher, I got Madison Bumgarner.
For catcher, I also like Wilson Contreras, so that's who I took. I went back-to-back Braves with Freddie Freeman and Ozzie Albies. Third base, Chris Bryant. Shortstop, Trey Turner. Outfield, I took Harper, Christian Yelich, and Charlie Blackmon. And then pitcher, I took Max Scherzer.
Yeah, and right away you could tell that we have two actually that matched up in Bryce Harper and Blackmon in the outfield, and then we have a lot of guys who are staples, as in Daniel Murphy, who can hit the ball, as well as a lot of young guys out there such as Rhys Hoskins, and you have Ozzie Albies. So definitely, I'm really surprised with the Ozzie Albies picks, but I guess he has a lot of potential.
Yeah, one of my favorite podcasts is the Sleeper and the Bust with Paul Sporer, and I think I listened to that one just way too much because all they like to do is just talk about Ozzie Albies. So I guess he's just been wearing off on me. And I really like Freddie Freeman. Obviously, I really like that Atlanta Braves lineup this year, especially whenever they bring in the young guy Acuna. So I think they're going to have a big year. Obviously Bryce Harper's in a contract year, so I think he could crush the ball. Chris Bryant, kind of had a little bit of a quiet year last year. I'm expecting him to bounce back and have a really big year this year. So, this one, I feel pretty confident with my picks here. Obviously, at first base, I took Freeman. You took Bellinger. You're kind of going with the young guy here, and I'm going with the more of the veteran. So that could be really exciting, and I'm just a big Christian Yelich fan in that new ballpark. So this one's going to be really fun as well. I really like watching NL baseball. No DH. It can be fun sometimes, a little bit more strategy maybe, but definitely a lot of young guys in this group as well as the AL. So like we've talked about before, baseball is in a really good place right now.
Yeah, and on the vice versa side of things is out in the outfield, I have Rhys Hoskins, who still a young guy, had 212 plate appearances last year, hit 18 home runs in those plate appearances, had a 259 average. This year, they're scheduling him to hit about 39 home runs, 102 RBIs, and have about the same average of 259. So I think he's going to probably be around there, maybe better. I think he does have the potential to hit maybe 45 home runs. The RBIs, I think, is right, 102, and I think his average is going to be a little bit better because in the minors, he's a guy who hit around 300. So I think the more he adjusts to the pitching in the majors, the higher the average the higher his average is going to go over the seasons.
Yeah, and I mean the same thing I talked about when I said Ozzie. I really like the lineup that Hoskins is in this year. You bring in Santana. They're going to have catcher Jorge Alfaro in the lineup for most of the year. You've got J.P. Crawford. They're going to have Scott Kingery sometime this year. So Philly's really going to be in a good spot, and I think Rhys Hoskins is probably going to be slated in that 3 or 4 slot for most of the year.
Yeah, and moving on to the next side of things, other than the Gold Glove Slugger, Platinum Glove, is one of those which is kind of hard to nail or peg. So this one's going to be really fun at the end of the year to see, and that's going to be the reliever of the year. So last year Craig Kimbrell, Kinsley Jansen won it. Kenley Jansen won it, and both those guys are closers. This year, I do have Kenley Jansen repeating for the NL for being reliever of the year. But for the AL, I actually went for Andrew Miller, who was kind of hurt a little bit last year, still pitched well, but a guy that I like to talk about as being lights out. And I feel like this year he could definitely take a reliever of the year without being a closer.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Jansen would probably be the smart pick. I mean, there's no doubt nobody's going to be surprised if he repeats as the best relief pitcher of the year. Andrew Miller's a stud. It's really interesting how the Indians use him. Obviously Terry Francona is a genius when it comes to baseball, so he really values Andrew Miller a lot by using him in the 7th, 8th inning, whenever he needs him, really. For my relievers, I took 2 closers. I took Edwin Diaz on the Seattle Mariners and then Rafael Iglesias on the Cincinnati Reds. Neither one of those guys are the Kimbrells, Jansens. They're both studs. They're both young, throw about 102 miles an hour each. And they're not really on great teams, but I'm still expecting really big years from both of those guys. So I think they'll be really fun to watch this year. I love watching a good closer come into the game and go 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I really like the Raisel Iglesias pick because I feel like he is a guy who is going to get a lot of opportunities this year. I don't think the Reds are as bad because they do have a lot of good talent. Billy Hamilton, Suarez, Votto. I feel like they're going to be good, and he's going to get a lot of opportunities. And I do like the Edwin Diaz pick as well. So, I kind of threw mine out there as like a Hail Mary, chance with the Andrew Miller, just because a lot of times the closers get it just because of the numbers that they put up and the more chances that they have. But Andrew Miller being a setup guy, I feel like could definitely post, good enough numbers to get there. So, like I said, reliever of the year is hard to peg, but all four of these guys are definitely really good relievers.
Oh yeah, no doubt about it, man. So now I think we're gonna do the rookie of the year for the AL, our top three. So let's hear who you got, man.
All right, so for rookie of the year, I have Austin Hayes for Baltimore. I have Willie Adames for Tampa Bay, and then I have Willie Calhoun for Texas.
I took Franklin Barreto of the Oakland Athletics. I did Willie Calhoun as my second guy, and then my winner is actually Michael Kopech, the pitcher for the Chicago White Sox.
Yeah, definitely. I do like that. I feel like Austin Hayes matches up kind of like Trey Mancini last year, and I feel like given the opportunities he has now, that's without saying that Colby Rasmus is now signed with the Orioles that we talked about last week, and he's been playing really well this spring, so I don't know how much time Hayes is going to have, but if given enough time, I feel like he can match up and have Mancini-type numbers, and Mancini was the top 3 in the Rookie of the Year last year, so I feel like that's kind of like my sleeper. Michael Kopech I don't have on this list, but definitely I feel like he's going to probably take it home, although I do see Willie Calhoun busting out in Texas.
Yeah, I mean, Willie Calhoun, obviously was a top prospect with the Dodgers, and he's never been really good defensively, so they traded him to Texas in the Yu Darvish trade from last year. So he can rake. He did get sent down recently, but it could be another thing where they just keep him down for a couple of weeks to kind of get another year of arbitration. With Michael Kopech, this guy is a flamethrower. I mean, he honestly reminds me a little bit of Noah Syndergaard. Last year, between AA and AAA, he pitched 134 innings with 172 strikeouts. That's 11.5 K per 9. So, I mean, the guy obviously he has a great fastball, really good curveball. I think he's going to be really exciting to watch this year. So right as soon as he does get called up, and you never know with the White Sox, since they don't really plan on being a good team this year, they might bring him up sooner than later to let him get some big league experience. I think he's going to be a guy you're going to want to watch every fifth day.
Yeah, and Franklin Barreto, that's definitely a nice pick on that list as well. I feel like he's one of those guys that can definitely turn it around and have a really good year on a young team. And one of the main things I want to say about this list here is really the only guy right now slated to be playing every day is Willie Calhoun. A lot of these guys, they're still kind of in the minors. They might not have spots, but that's not to say that they're going to come up and or not come up and make an impact, because Willie Adames, he's doesn't have room right now. You have Adeiny Hechavarria out there at shortstop in Tampa Bay, but if Hechavarria starts to struggle, you could definitely see that call up. Kind of the same with Franklin Barreto, is that you have Marcus Semien playing short with the A's, so there's not really a room for him yet, but he could still come up, September call-ups, maybe even a lot sooner if some of these guys start to struggle.
And something that's really interesting is neither one of us picked Shohei Ohtani on our list. Obviously, as we talked before the show, he's really had a bad spring training. His ERA and 2.2 innings, he's given up 8 earned runs, which is a 27 ERA. And then hitting, he has 2 hits and 20 at-bats, which gives him a 100 average. So, obviously they're spring training numbers, so we don't know. He's the number 1 prospect in baseball, according to a ton of sites. So it was kind of interesting that neither one of us put him on there. And now he's had a bad spring. There has been a little bit of rumors that have come out recently that he might start the year in AAA. So it's going to be really interesting to keep your eye on him. Obviously he was a big time talk this offseason coming out of Japan, but so far it's going to take him a little while to adjust, I think.
Yeah, and I agree. I don't have him here just because this was even before all these numbers or this talk has come out, because we did this list like last week at some time. I think it was maybe like Wednesday or Tuesday of last week we wrote this up. And one of the things with Ohtani is I just don't think he's that good. That's just my opinion. I feel like the Angels don't really need him right now. I think they need him more so on the starting pitching side. So I know he wants to do both, but if I was the Angels, I'd be like, hey, you really need to work on just this aspect in the majors. Because a lot of that stuff that works over there in Japan isn't going to translate over here. As we talked about on our ride back from that fantasy baseball, is I just don't think there was a lot of people out of Japan who have been really good, and there's been a very minute amount, but all the people who have come over and just can't adjust. So it is a big transition, and one of those things that I think that he just needs to work on one aspect instead of both.
And talking of top prospects, we're going to switch over to the Rookie of the Year NL, and I'm going to take a guess here. I'm going to say Ronald Acuna is on the list. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I think he might have made it. I'm surprised I didn't put him at 1, 2, and 3, but yeah, he is definitely on this list. And I have him as first overall, obviously, but number 3 I have Jack Flaherty, pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals, and Victor Robles for the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, and then Acuna at number 1. Same for me. I also have Acuna at 1. I took the Cincinnati Reds third baseman, now shortstop, I guess, Nick Senzel at my 3 spot. And then at number 2, I took J.P. Crawford of the Philadelphia Phillies.
Yeah, and of course, like I said, this list was before things have happened, and I think whenever I put this on here, Acuna only had maybe 1 home run. So since then, he's just mashed 3 more and then just crushing the ball this weekend. So, like I said, I think he's a runaway if he gets called up. I definitely think he will be.
Yeah, I mean, with pretty much any of these picks, it's, we'll see when they get called up. With Acuna, I don't think it's if he gets called up. It's definitely when he gets called up. It's probably going to be soon. I think that's why I also put J.P. Crawford on this list. I'm not in love with J.P. Crawford. I don't think he's going to be a stud like an Acuna or a Robles. But I think J.P. Crawford's going to get the starting shortstop job from day one. So I think he might accumulate a lot of stats because he's kind of a guy that's really going to be playing a ton this year. I think Philly's going to give him a shot. Obviously, they traded their shortstop Freddie Galvis to San Diego this offseason. So I think it's J.P. Crawford's job, and he's been on prospect list for a long time. Obviously, he's kind of more of a glove-first shortstop, but I think he'll put up some good numbers for Philly this year.
Yeah, and basically all 3 of my guys really aren't even in the majors yet. So just kind of like on the AL side of things, even though I did have Willie Calhoun, a lot of these guys are guys I see having good upside or guys I think can come in, like especially with Flaherty, of course, for the Cardinals is if Wainwright, he is old, he's 36. If he gets hurt, then, they need a spot. I could definitely see them calling up Flaherty because I feel like he is ready. Miles Mikolas could, be bad. I don't know. They have,
yeah.
Luke Weaver there, who obviously I don't see him replacing that or Walker or Carlos Martinez, but Mikolas or Wainwright, I could definitely see Flaherty replacing either of those guys.
Yeah, he's been a top prospect for a little while for them, and obviously they have pretty high hopes for them. And with Yadier Molina catching, a young pitcher can kind of get a little bit easier of a break with Molina back there.
Yeah, and we're going to move on to one thing that we don't talk enough of on this show, like we say, which is managers. But for the managers of the year, I do have 3 guys here that are all. Where's one new, but I think they're all decent. 3 I have Terry Francona for the Cleveland Indians. 2 I have Alex Cora for the Boston Red Sox, and 1 I have Buck Showalter for the Orioles. I let a bit of a homer pick there.
I'm sure you're not letting your true colors show.
Oh, no.
For 3, I took Mike Scioscia on the Los Angeles Angels of Anaheim. 2, Terry Francona, and number 1, I actually went with Aaron Boone of the New York Yankees.
Yeah, and definitely an interesting pick. Now, this is just what I think will happen, or, a guess, but if I were to think about it, I mean, both these guys, and Cora and Boone, former players, really no managing experience whatsoever, but they have the team that can kind of carry them there. It's going to be interesting to see how they can correlate things, because there's a lot to go into managing. You got to manage your bullpen, lefty right up matchups, sit someone if they're, having like a terrible string of starts, if they're hot, they're cold, where to bat them in the lineup. It's going to be tough for these guys to do it, and they just don't have the repertoire as these other guys. Buck Showalter, of course, winning it in 2013. I feel like this year with the team that he has, it's going to be tough with the pitching, and if they can do well, it's one of those guys that will definitely make it just because he's going to get them there without having good talent.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, with Scioscia, I think the Angels are going to have a good year. Obviously, Terry Francona seems to be up there every year, so that was kind of our safe pick. And with Aaron Boone, I mean, I'm expecting big things out of the Yankees. With that lineup, I mean, I think me or you could be in the dugout for the Yankees and just tell them to go hit some more homers, and they probably will be able to. So, that one was kind of an easy pick from my opinion. But the NL was really interesting because we actually came out with two of the same choices on this one.
Yeah, and then the NL, I have Brian Snitker for the Atlanta Braves. Last year, I thought Atlanta was going to have an amazing year. This year, I feel like they're going to do well, so I have him in there. 2, I have Dave Martinez for the Washington Nationals, and then 1, I have Craig Counsell for the Brewers.
Yeah, I love that pick of Craig Counsell. I think the Brewers are going to have a big year. At 3, I took Gabe Kapler of the Phillies. 2, I took Craig Counsell on the Brewers. And then 1, I did throw in a little homer pick here. I took Dave Martinez of the Washington Nationals.
Yeah, and I think a little bit of the difference between your homer pick and my homer pick is yours actually has a shot at winning it. But yeah, the 2 that we can agree on, Craig Counsell, Dave Martinez, I could easily see both those guys flipped either or. I feel like Martinez is going to have a good year, coaching that team. Definitely a team that's going to make the playoffs again. It's just if they can win in the playoffs. And Craig Counsell is, we talk up the Brewers a lot on this show as a team that has really improved this year, and that's a guy that definitely is going to get the nod if they play well. And, on our back end, we do have 2 young teams. I took Snitker, of course, and you took Kapler. So the Braves and the Phillies, both young teams that are going to have a good year.
Yeah, it's going to be exciting. Milwaukee kind of seems, obviously we'll have our standing prediction show next week. The Milwaukee is kind of a sleeper team in my opinion. They made a lot of moves this offseason, but it still seems like everybody's talking about the Cubs for good reason and the Cardinals. So that could be a team that's going to be really exciting this year. Obviously Atlanta, I like their lineup a lot. They have a lot of young pieces. Philly, they've made some really nice pickups this offseason. So with really these picks, I mean, I think we're both going the right track on this one.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And what we're going to do now is we're going to do the big stuff at the end here. So for the Cy Young and MVPs, we have done our top 3. So just like they do, they have a top 3. And then who we have at 1 is who we think's going to win it. But definitely any of these guys could win. So we're going to go and start off with the Cy Young for the NL. So at 3, I have Madison Bumgarner. 2, I have Max Scherzer. And 1, I have Clayton Kershaw winning it.
Yeah, I mean, all good picks. Obviously, I'm taking Scherzer at 3. He's won back-to-back NL Cy Youngs. At 2, I took Clayton Kershaw. I mean, he's the best pitcher in the game right now. And number 1, I kind of went off the wall with another homer pick. I went Steven Strasburg. I just explain it really quick. Obviously, he battles injuries a lot. And the second half last year, he was probably the best pitcher in the game, and then he went into the playoffs and shut down the Cubs in both of his starts. So I'm going with that pick just because I think this might be the year he actually stays healthy, puts it all together, and I think if he does, he could win the Cy Young easily.
Yeah, and all 3 of these guys definitely really good. I have Madison Bumgarner in my top 3. Just because I feel like he's primed for a big bounce back year. Last year obviously the injuries hurt him out a lot, but if he could stay healthy this year, I feel like definitely be in consideration for it. Of course, there are a lot of other guys out there who have consideration. You guys got the guys like, Lester, who could have a good year. Kyle Hendricks, who's been, having year after year, good year. Yu Darvish, of course, you don't know what he's going to do with the Cubs. A lot of Cubs could definitely be in consideration for this. So, there's a lot of other guys out there. Syndergaard could even pull it out. Yeah. But I feel like I'm going to give it to Clayton Kershaw. If I would have to pick like an off the wall, I would definitely think Noah Syndergaard.
Now, I'm looking over here at your AL Cy Young, and I think there might be a typo in your number 3 spot. Do you care to explain that one for us, Ryan?
Yeah, no, there is no typo in the number 3 spot out there. So, I don't know who all out there is just going to think I'm crazy for it. Probably everyone. But
Probably everyone.
Probably everyone. But, I have a really strong feeling about this guy this year, and I'm just going to throw it out there and be Cy Young for the AL. I have 3 Andrew Cashner, 2 Chris Sale, and 1 Corey Kluber.
I just want to give everybody a second to think about that. Okay. At 3, I took Carlos Carrasco on the Cleveland Indians. 2, I also went Chris Sale. And number 1, another off-the-wall pick, I'm going with Tampa Bay's Chris Archer.
Yeah, and you know what? My off-the-wall pick is really good. Andrew Cashner, I think, is primed to have a good year. Now, do I really think he's going to be, Cy Young winner? yes, I'll just go ahead and say it. I think he's going to have a really good year. The one thing that's going to hurt him is strikeouts, just because he's not that same pitcher. He pitches a lot of ground balls. But I'm just going to say this. Come the end of the season, whenever you look back on this and he's there or has like an amazing year, I just want you to remember this, that I said it first. Now, on the flip side of things, if Andrew Cashner runs out there in the first 3 games and has like an ERA of 15, I want you all to not remember this and do not think about it at all.
I'll tell this right now, and I'll say it on the podcast so everybody can hear. If Andrew Cashner finishes in the top 3 in Cy Young, I will buy Ryan and one random listener, a Andrew Cashner jersey, the shirt with the jersey looking thing. Yeah, that I'll buy it. 2 of them, one for you, Ryan, and one for one random listener if he finishes in the top 3.
There we go. So whoever whoever that random listener out there is, just make sure you listen all year, because you're going to be getting a T-shirt jersey of Andrew Cashner. It's going to be amazing. We can wear them. It's going to be awesome.
You can go to the game together and wear them, get his autograph.
Autograph on it. Yeah, it's going to be amazing. Now, and if Andrew Cashner at all listens, which he doesn't, I know you can do it, buddy.
And, I just want to say with Chris Archer, obviously he's not supposed to be on a great team. I've been a big fan of his for a good while. He's gotten over 200 innings pitched for 3 straight years. Obviously he gets around 10 to 11 strikeouts per inning. I think this year, he might actually just put it all together. Obviously his ERA was a little high last year, 4.07. I think he could really have a big year. It's going to be tough going against the AL East with some big lineups, but I think he's going to have a great defense behind him with guys like Carlos Gomez, Kevin Kiermaier, as you talked about, even a really fast guy like Malik Smith in left field. So I think he's going to be kind of somebody that I'm really going to be watching this year, and I'm putting some faith in him.
Yeah, and one of those things that I kind of threw out there is I do have Kluber winning it. I'm not happy about it just because Kluber is one of those guys that can always have one of those years like he did in 2015 where he went 9-16 with a 3.49 ERA. Of course, he had 18-9, 2016, 18-4, and 2017, which we talked about in the Indians show. But he seems to always have these 2 great years, and then the third year just kind of falls off. So hopefully he doesn't do that again this year, because I think he's an amazing pitcher. But definitely I feel like he's a guy who has 21 potential, and if he's on, definitely a guy that I see winning it.
Yeah, and just so we can, we don't want to have him get overlooked, which I don't think he does, but Chris Sale has finished at least top 6 in the Cy Young voting for 6 straight years. So, putting him at second, it wouldn't surprise anybody here. He's actually never won a Cy Young, but I don't think it would surprise anybody if he won one. He had over 300 strikeouts last year. That was almost a 13 strikeout per 9. He plays for Boston, which is awesome because he's got a great lineup behind him. But I just, Chris Sale is obviously a stud. It wouldn't surprise either one of us if he won, but we got him in there at second. So
yeah, and so on the hitting side of thing, we're going to now talk about our MVP candidates. So starting off with the NL first again, I have my top 3 is Bryce Harper, Nolan Arenado, and then I have Joey Votto winning it.
At number 3, I took Freddie Freeman on the Atlanta Braves. Number 2, I like the third baseman for the Cubs, Chris Bryant. And number 1, another homer pick in the contract year, Bryce Harper.
Yeah, and I do like the Bryce Harper. Since I have him 3, you have him winning it. I definitely like that. I like the Freddie Freeman in there. I feel like he could have a bust-out year. Votto is always going to hit the ball, and he's always in consideration of that MVP. So I feel like this is going to be the year that he wins, and definitely one of those things that it's hard to peg for MVP because anyone could come out there and have an amazing year. Of course, Stanton moves over to the AL, and he was the NL MVP last year, and Altuve was the MVP for the AL. So, it's definitely anyone's game, and we'll have to see how it plays out. 2016, Mike Trout won it. For the AL. So, like I said, all these guys really good. We'll have to see where it plays out.
Yeah, I mean, I like Freddie Freeman. Chris Bryant obviously won it 2 years ago. Bryce Harper had a great year, a couple of years ago when he won MVP. Joey Votto, like I talked about before, he gets on base, at an amazing rate. Something that really is kind of interesting for our MVP for the AL side is actually, spoiler alert, neither one of us picked Mike Trout in our top 3.
Yeah, and that's actually really interesting. I never even thought about it now that you mention it. 3, I have Manny Machado. Of course, he's in that contract year. I feel like he's going to have a really good year. As I talked about with your friend, that, Manny Machado, the reason why his numbers weren't as good last year is he hit the ball really hard. He just got unlucky with, it falling in, whether it be defense or just, how it was hit, but had one of the highest hard hit contact in the league. So I definitely think that's going to fall through for him this year. 2, I have Jose Altuve, last year's winner, and then 1, I have Giancarlo Stanton, who I think is just going to bring it over to the AL side of things.
Yeah, I promise I'm not a Cleveland Indians fan, but at 3, I took Jose Ramirez. 2, Carlos Correa, and number 1, how could I not pick Francisco Lindor?
Oh boy, you know what? Now that I think about it, I kind of want to modify my MVP for the AL, and I want to put Andrew Cashner at number 3 instead of Machado. I feel like that. No, I wouldn't do that.
With Mike Trout, obviously, neither one of us. The same thing with Chris Sale. He could win MVP. Not going to surprise anybody. I think for at least my thinking, and probably yours as well, it's no fun really to put Mike Trout at number 1 because obviously if he wins, everybody's like, yeah, you picked Mike Trout to win MVP. Big whoop. Of course he's going to win MVP. So we kind of went with fun selections. Obviously Lindor, I really like him. Stanton's going to have, hit 60 homers maybe for the Yankees. So I just want to say we don't hate Mike Trout. We don't think we think he's awesome. It's just probably a little bit more fun to go with a little bit off the wall picks.
Oh, yeah, definitely. And, I think if Stanton did not get traded to the Yankees, for sure Mike Trout would be in my top 3. But with now Stanton being in the AL, I think the competition for the MVP is really hard for Mike Trout to win. Jose Altuve, Stanton, of course we say Mike Trout, but, even these other guys like Correa. Correa could have had an MVP year last year if he didn't get hurt. And then, Manny Machado could definitely be up there. So it's definitely a tougher competition in the AL than it has been for recent years for Mike Trout.
Yeah, there's a ton of guys you can put in this list, for both sides. Obviously, you didn't list Paul Goldschmidt in the NL. I didn't even put Jose Altuve, and he won it last year in the MVP for the AL. So, obviously, like we talked about a lot on this podcast, baseball has a ton of younger superstars, just superstars in general. Neither one of us put Aaron Judge on our MVP. He could hit 60 bombs just like Stanton could. So, really, I think offense, it's going to be interesting. One thing we don't really talk about is the juice baseball. A lot of people think the baseball, there's something modified in it, which is allowing this many home runs. It's going to be interesting to see how that carries over into this year. If the commissioner, Rob Manfred, made some changes, obviously he's been tweaking some stuff with the game, with the time management, trying to speed the game up. He put in a rule, for the minors this week where, every extra inning game, I believe, starts with a guy on second, so we could obviously spend a whole podcast talking about all the different rules that they're trying to change. So it's going to be interesting to see how much the baseball changes, if home runs are the same or if they're down a little bit. So it's going to be a really exciting year. We're really excited, obviously, and it's just going to be so much fun to talk about it with everybody.
Yeah, and who's not to forget about even the rule for the intentional walking, which is, now they can just say, hey, we just want to put that guy on first, and there he goes. They don't even have to pitch the 4 balls anymore. And, that's one of those things that I did like about baseball is the fact that with those 4 balls thrown, anything can happen. I remember the Orioles tried to intentionally walk Miguel Cabrera one year, like back in 2007 or whatever it was, and he hit a home run on a ball that was like 3 feet out because it was a little bit too far in. But, they are making a lot of rules to speed the game up, which, It's totally understandable for the newer people who want to get into baseball who think it's too long or too boring, but a lot of that intangibles is what makes the game great.
Yeah, exactly. I think anybody, obviously me and you love baseball because we're doing a podcast about baseball, and anybody that's listening to it obviously is a pretty big baseball fan since they're listening to it as well. So, when you watch a baseball game, I don't think anybody's going to complain about, good baseball. If it's 3 hours, that's what you sign up for pretty much when you go to a game, or if you turn it on the radio, TV. Obviously maybe limiting the mound trips like they did to 6, that might be okay. I think when they start tweaking the actual game is where I have a problem. I don't like them starting guys at second base. I don't like some of the rules that they're talking about, maybe a pitch clock that might throw the pitchers off a little bit because, obviously they need a little bit to catch their breath between pitches when these guys are now throwing 102 miles an hour. But certain things, Manfred probably should calm down a little bit on, in my opinion, at least, because I love baseball. And whenever I go to a game, I'm never like, man, I wish this would get done sooner. Yeah. I'm good to stay all day. So it's going to be interesting to see how much the players and fans push back. like you said, they're really trying to get younger fans into it. But I think a lot of these young superstars are going to help do that. Guys like Correa, Altuve, Lindor, they're really like kids are going to go out there and they're going to see Bryce Harper and they're going to get more into baseball. So, maybe minor tweaks, but I just hope they don't change the fundamentals of baseball, since that's what we can all agree that we love about the game.
Yeah, and one thing is if you know baseball, then you know kind of how it works. But with the whole pitch clock thing, is these pitchers aren't, if you're not someone who follows baseball a lot and just listens because you like to watch it casually or what may not be. But one of the thing is with these pitchers is they're not out there just lollygagging when they're taking time. There goes a lot into pitching. Like, what does he think I'm going to throw? I just threw a fastball. Does he think I'm going to come back with the curveball? I just threw inside. Does he think I'm going to go outside? There's a lot to think about, and you can't just think about it in like 2 seconds and be like, I'm just throw this, because then you just give up a home run.
Exactly. I mean, it's obviously it's a very physical sport. You've got to be really gifted physically, but it's a really thinking sport. You have to, like you said, that's what makes guys like Yadier Molina so great behind the plate, because they're always thinking 3 or 4 steps ahead of everybody else. They're thinking about, he's late on a fastball, and let's throw a curveball, let's throw a changeup, let's throw a slider. They're going through so many different things between each pitch. Maybe 20 seconds isn't enough time. So if they put the pitch clock on, that could really change things. But right now it's going to be the main thing that I'm really interested to see is how much that baseball changes, because obviously guys like Verlander have come out and said, in the World Series, Charlie Morton and Yu Darvish talked about how they felt like it was a different baseball. So it's going to be interesting if they try to change something under the radar without maybe alerting people. But yeah, that's definitely going to be one of the more interesting things to look at least the first week of the season to compare it to.
Yeah, for sure. And next week we're going to be talking about more projections. This time it's going to be a lot harder than it was this week, I think, in my opinion, because we're going to have to nail down who we think is going to win World Series MVP, which is a hard thing to do when we don't even know who's going to get to the World Series. But we're going to get you there. We're going to think, we're going to say who we're going to win, the AL East, the NL East, all the divisions, who's going to win the wild card spots, and then kind of the matchups. So, like, who's going to win that wild card game to go on to face whom, and then who's going to win and how many games they're going to win, and then predict who we think is going to be, the MVPs of, the ALCS, NLCS, the World Series, and who we think is going to win it all. So that'll be definitely a really interesting one. I feel like that's going to be pretty different between both of us when we start comparing teams as instead of just players.
Yeah, I mean, whenever I grab a baseball magazine, and I've been like this for years, I always love looking at the predictions for everybody. I love seeing who they think is going to win divisions and advance in the playoffs. So it's so much fun now to actually get to do my own with you, Ryan, and next week that's going to be our last show before opening day. So we'll definitely talk about all of the opening day matchups, who's going to win, who we think's going to win at least. We'll have at least hopefully all the projected starters right now. We have, probably about half of them. I'm looking through the list right now. Some really interesting names. James Shields is going to be on the bump for the White Sox. Clayton Richards is going for the Padres. I believe Ivan Nova is going to face off against Jordan Zimmerman when the Pirates play the Tigers. So there's definitely some interesting names, but circle the calendar for 7:00 whenever we get to see Bumgarner, Kershaw, and man, I mean, it's just going to be fun doing the prediction show. It's going to be fun breaking down some opening day action, a couple of games into the season, and like Ryan said earlier, just thank you everybody for listening, and I hope we can't wait to hear from you guys.
Yeah, and like I said, for that 7:00 show, it's going to be our 7:00 show, 7:00 game. The Dodgers and the Giants. We're actually going to be watching it together, so maybe we can give some insight on the game as well, and bring you a lot of stuff for that opening day. Because that following week, not sure when we're going to actually record it on opening day week, since there is a lot of baseball, but we'll try to fit it in to where we have some games to talk about as well, and just continue going forward. Thanks everyone for listening again, and thank you so much for joining me again, Logan.
Yeah, man. And if any of you guys are going to an opening day, let us know. I think me and you, Ryan, we're going to the Nats home opener, which is the week after. But if you guys are going to a game, let us know. We'd love to hear about what who you guys are going to go see. And like Ryan said, thanks for everything, guys.
Yeah, definitely. 11 days, guys. Woo.